Today we're going to talk about how to talk about health and medicine in American culture.
It can be tricky. What's up, guys, and welcome back to WaiGuo Friends English. This is kind of a follow-up video from our previous one where we were talking about phrasals of medicine and health, but we thought that it would be a really good chance for us to be able to kind of share a little bit of wisdom what it's like to actually talk to an American about the difficulty actually of talking about medicine and health, because in different cultures that is a more or less public conversation where you come up to a friend, you ask them, hey, how's your health, how's your wife, how's your family, how's this, how's that. And in America, that is really not what we do. So there are some pitfalls of language that you can fall into if you're kind of a little bit too nosy, is what we would consider, a little too nosy. So how would we then come up to a person, realistically ask them, how are they doing?
First of all, you have to have a right to ask about that. For some reason, health and money are extremely private topics in America. Family members can ask, but only certain family members, like your great aunt, can't come to you and ask you that. I mean, in some family cultures, yes. America is very complicated because it's a big country, there's a lot of regions, there's a lot of different backgrounds. And demographically, there's a lot of different things going on as well. But generally speaking, health is a very private matter. And it's kind of like how much money you make. It's a very private thing to us. So, for example, you should never go to your coworker and say, hey, how's your health? How's your wife? How's this? How's this? You need to be working together for quite some time. And you need to have a very relaxed relationship for that to happen. Because being at work and asking about health problems is not appropriate, culturally speaking. And generally speaking, you don't ever go to a stranger and ask that unless you are a doctor or they come to you asking for help or for an opinion. So generally speaking, we don't get into health with strangers at all. Like even good friends of mine, like even my best friend, I don't talk about my health with my best friend, for example. But again, that's me and my culture, my personal background that colors that. Would you talk about your health?
I tend to be a little bit more open-handed for a lot of conversations, but health is one of those that, like, I tend to find myself more shy to divulge any sort of deep information. Like, I would be okay if I know a person has kids, talking about their kids. You know, what are your kids into? I know that your kid's into t-ball, and how's that going?
They didn't come to church last week. Were they sick?
Yeah, like what's going on? I'm willing to talk about my child's schedule or what's going on with them. Maybe they're snotty, or maybe they come down with like a cough or something. But when it's talking about my health or my mom's health or something like that, all of a sudden it switches. I realize that just now, just in this video, that I'm much more willing to talk about my kids coming down with a cough rather than my mom's health.
Yeah, it doesn't go up, right? It goes down, but it doesn't go up. So the kids under you, but even then, by the time they're teenagers, we don't talk about their health very much either, especially if it's something big. Maybe you find that there's something about their gut that's just really not right and they're going to require surgery. Some people might be more open about that, but in our situation, we would not say anything like that. Like, we don't want to embarrass them, especially as teenagers, right? You don't want them and all their friends posting on their Facebook profile or their Instagram, like, hey, hope you get better with that disease or that thing. Like, I think that's the fear, especially in our area. The fear is people just running off and gossiping about it and just telling the world about the problems. It's not very respectful to talk about someone else behind their back. We don't talk about other people as much. Now, again, this is our culture and our area. This is not everybody. So in the American South, you have people that talk about everything. They'll give you everything, maybe even their bank account numbers. You don't know. They'll say everything and they'll talk about everybody. But then there's other people closer to our own family culture that would be like, no, we don't talk about any of that. It is not my business. That is their story to tell, and they're not telling it, so I'm not going to even participate. I'm not even going to stand in there and listen to a conversation other people are having about someone else's health. Will not do it, because it's not my information to know. If that person wants me to know, they're going to come and tell me about it, or they're going to come and talk to me about it. But that's, again, any health conversation I have ever had in any part of the country has not been more than one or two people.
Yeah.
And it's been very close people, or they're looking for prayer for something, especially as believers. They're asking for prayer, and we pray together about that issue. But it's not something that's like, let's sit in a waiting room and talk about all the things that's wrong with us and why we're there. Like, we don't do that.
On the other hand, in public school, one of the things that I actually really, really disliked is people doing this very publicly. So they would talk about how they're wasting away because of some sort of terminal disease, it seemed like, at least in their mind. And sometimes they were actually struggling with something. It was really bad. But in other times, they were using it almost as a license to just have everybody pay attention to them. Any PR is good PR, I guess. And so they would basically use that as an opportunity to say, look at me, I'm feeling so bad.
It happens now too. Maybe they think they can get something out of it. So if they make a big enough fuss, then people will say, you know what, let me take care of that for you. Or let me come mow your yard because I'm sure you can't do it or something. If they can get something, there are some people that will do that.
Yeah, but generally speaking, what's important, I feel like, to know, especially from a person inside this culture, is that normal adults, they see a person being overly upfront and overly loud about their health or others' health around them. I would say, generally speaking, a normal American would understand, like, that's not necessarily the kind of person that I want to be around because they're talking about their health problems every minute of every day.
Me.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, out of politeness, generally speaking, a lot of us are pretty quiet and reserved about how much of ourselves that we talk about. Especially something that might incur pity. We're very proud of people, generally speaking. We're very proud of our opinions and individualism. We don't want to appear weak, generally speaking, unless by appearing weak we can get something out of it. That's a general cultural trend, I would say. Yeah. Pretty fair to say. But if you can't get much out of it, then you kind of want to be kind of quiet about it. Now, there are stigmas around this, right? So there are times where a woman will have a miscarriage and she won't tell anybody, not even in her own family, about this miscarriage and the pain that she's been suffering and grieving a baby on her own. In this situation, that's a heavy stigma that a lot of people follow, and she should probably let someone in and help her through that process, especially since having miscarriages is so common. This is one of those things that's being pushed back, and if you come to this country, you're going to see some propaganda, you're going to see some commercials, you'll see billboards beside the road talking about if you've had a miscarriage, open up, tell somebody, talk to somebody, get a support group. You can get this for addictions. Somebody who's struggling with addiction, they want to get out, but they're having trouble doing it. They want to be closed. Their automatic feeling culturally is to not tell anybody about that struggle outside of their immediate family. But if they really want it, you could see, again, these billboards, these commercials, everything like get help, call this hotline, get into this group. We have resources for you in the community to help you get out of addiction, and you can only do that with community. So we have a lot of that in America. So I can see how people get kind of confused, like, oh, so I should be able to just come and if I really care about you or I feel like you're my friend, I should be able to ask you, like, did you get the vaccine? Did you get the COVID vaccine? Did you get your flu vaccine? Or if I see you eating a greasy hamburger 4 days a week at work, man, isn't this really bad for your body? Don't you feel terrible? How is your poop? We've had questions like this before as Americans traveling abroad. It's like, you don't want to assume. And I think that's the main thing is if somebody's asking you, hey, are you feeling okay in your health? The thought is you are assuming that they have bad habits. Yeah. And that's kind of rude.
I think that is one of the biggest reasons why people tend to just kind of shut themselves off and kind of go ghost. Is just like, it's awkward. It's almost like it's embarrassing for me to be sick, which sounds weird, but like I don't want to be lying on the bed and people texting me all the time like, hey, are you better? Or hey, how's it going? Or hey, did you throw up yet? Or hey, did this happen? I really just want to basically unplug from the world for a little bit and just entrust one or two people to care for me and to think about me in that time. And obviously that's different person to person. So for you guys, coming from your own cultures to this culture, the reason why we bring it up is because Americans operate in this mentality of it's kind of almost shameful to be struggling with cancer. I don't want to talk about my chemotherapy so much. I don't want to talk about this. Yet, you will hear quite a bit of people talk about how this celebrity has cancer and they're going through chemotherapy and everybody's talking about it and everybody knows. Well, that's exactly the reason why normal Americans will go the opposite extreme and say, I only want one or two people to know, my doctor and my spouse, and maybe one or two other people in my family. Generally speaking, we want to be kept private. And so if you have an American friend that is kind of opening up to some of these medical things that they're struggling with, whether it's diagnoses or it's just treatment things that they're doing, that's a big thing. That's a special place to be. And so you need to be able to recognize that and treat that appropriately, meaning don't spread it around.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Different cultures treat this differently. If you feel like your friend, your American friend, has entrusted you with some kind of medical information and you feel that it is okay and appropriate in your culture to go and tell the other friends that you guys share those things, that's not okay in this culture. That is not, it is their story to tell, not yours. So if you've been entrusted with that information, it's your job to stay zip about it, to be quiet about it, and to make sure that you're there for them to some degree. Check in on them now and then. It's not something like you've got to check on them every hour of the day, like, oh my goodness, are you okay? But it's more of a, don't freak out, but just offer your support and offer to be there. And genuinely so. Don't say that you're going to be there and you can help pay for things and stuff if you can't. Don't overpromise. We don't do that in this culture either. We try to keep things fairly realistic. But again, all of this is not true of everybody, because even we know Americans, plenty of them, that are very open doors about this. Fertility treatments. This is one of those things that's kind of a stigma to talk about, but there are a lot of people that are very open about their struggle with this, with having children. There's a lot of people who are very open about their cancer struggles, but there's other people that go all the way until the final months of a terminal cancer before they say anything to anybody else that they are struggling with cancer. So it's one of those things that, like, you're going to find both sides, and you're going to find a lot probably of both sides. But generally speaking, for you guys coming from where you are over here, it's much easier to treat it with a lot of respect and distance and ease into it and letting an American friend get closer to you. Much easier to do that than for you to just come right out of the gate and try to be the closest friend ever. Because like I said, there's a lot of Americans, even their best friends have no idea what's going on with them medically. Would you say there's been anything like super awkward where an American tried to get way too close to you in medical things?
Honestly, the answer is not really. Like, I feel like whenever a person does kind of step on my toes a little bit and they kind of push too far, normally it's out of a joke. I have older brothers. That was a thing that happened a lot, which is just joking about something that was actually quite serious. That happened quite a bit. Yeah. And so for me, I feel like that was like whenever a person comes up to me, another American comes up to me and they're joking about like, you know, you remember that one time, ha ha ha, that you cannonballed into a pool and broke your butt? Like that, it's a joke at that point for somebody to bring that up. And in truth, I know that that's a joke. If they were actually being honest and like looked at me and said, how's your butt? Is it okay? Like that would be really awkward because that's not what we do when we're joking with our friends. Right. So we take something that medically speaking is actually could be quite serious and we make light of it. That's fairly normal in my relationships with my other guy friends because that's who I am.
You're a facetious guy.
Because that's who I am.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, no. If somebody goes way over the top, actually it's very uncomfortable. Or talk about you or something where they're just continually like, how's it going? Are you okay? Like, you need to do this. You need to rest. You need to slow down. You need to, sit down. You need to watch out. For me, that's like super uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really don't like that.
It happens to me a lot. Like people like pressuring a lot, like trying to figure out like what's really going on with my health. And generally it's because I'm a mom and we have kids. That's generally where it's coming from. And for me personally, especially when I was abroad and pregnant, that was very difficult because where we were, it was very common practice to come up and basically, especially for a new mom, an older woman who has had a child before, to come up and tell you all the things you're doing wrong and all the things that you're doing that's going to harm your child. And for us, it was just not okay. It was very, very difficult. Now, I understood that I was in their country. This is their way of sharing concern and showing that they are concerned and they want to care for me. I knew that, but it still made me angry. My first response was still to be angry because that's not acceptable here. It's not in my culture. So it's one of those things. Of course, I wouldn't act out in anger. I would just kind of shut down a little bit in the moment and just kind of get a grip and then move forward. But that's one of those things. Like something like birth or things like that can be very, very touchy. So it's one of those things. It's like, for whatever reason, some people feel like they have to say something. I don't understand why. Even in America, some people, if they see a woman who's she's very pregnant, baby's gonna come soon, they just have to say something, or they want to reach out and touch the belly or something. That's very uncomfortable. Yeah, it's very uncomfortable. So, and again, when people come and ask Josh, like, hey, how's it going? Any difficulties or things like that? He's very polite in saying like, no, because he knows that I would not like that. And also I'm not in the room. So it's one of those things. Health things are very tricky to talk about in America. better to start at a distance and let the American come to you in openness in that sense. So how do we show somebody that we genuinely care about them? Because in a lot of cultures, like where we were, that was specifically how they showed that they cared.
I think a big part is touching base with a person without pressuring them to say, you know, what can I do? Or like, do you need something for your feet? Do you need to put your feet up? Or do you need some glass of water? Like, don't do that. Just touch base with them every now and again. Say, hey man, I'm thinking about you. Not even like because I know you're sick, but just having that regular interval of saying, hey, like, I'm thinking about you.
Yeah.
That's it. Like that's all you really need. And if the person wants to divulge more information and wants some help, then they know who to reach out to.
They can open that door the rest of the way. The point is just making yourself available to say, hey, I'm willing to listen. Now, a lot of the time you're going to get the very defensive and quick, like, I'm fine, doing all right, kids are great. You're going to get that. And people will say that even if that's not true. But it's because things like an argument in the marriage, that's very uncomfortable to talk about. Poor family health, like we're having some relationship difficulty between us and the kids. That's something we would only talk about to really close people. So this is one of those things to like be very careful of, observe it quite a bit before you actually start into it.
All right, guys, man, that was a lot. And we used some of the phrasal verbs that we talked about in the previous video, but really it's just a good opportunity for you to see what do we do? What do we do in this very difficult topic, this linguistic context of health? Yeah. It's a difficult thing to do very naturally, very fluently.
And it doesn't help that we all handle it differently in different parts of the country. From family to family, the culture is different. From person to person, in an individualistic culture, we have different wishes. Even Josh is willing to talk about more things than I am. And so it's one of those things that's just the way it is. It's one of those things that's difficult to navigate. So I hope that you're able to get some wisdom in how to handle this, at least an approach where you can start further back and not ask those questions directly, but let the American come to you. And as your relationship builds, as more and more years add on, you might see more and more openness in this kind of realm.
If you guys like this kind of video where we talk a little bit more about the culture side of America and how that kind of plays into the linguistic side of English, let us know in the comments below.
Yep, we're happy to do more of these, but we want to make sure it's something that's actually serving what you need.
All right, guys, we'll catch you on the next one.